Okay, we are holding chapter 4 in Basi Legani Tafshin Chaf, the Maimer from Yud Shvat, the Rebbe said 1960. We have learned, we've talked in the past classes about the fact that this Maimer touches on three themes that the Rebbe identifies in chapter 10 of the previous Rebbe's Maimer, upon which our Maimer here is based. The first theme was that through Avodas Adam, through our divine service, we draw the essence of God into this world, what he calls Seivev Amiti, the true transcendent light. In addition to that, we said that we connected with Basi Legani, the idea of coming back to my garden. Who's coming to the garden? Iker Shechina, the transcendent level of divinity, and particularly we said specifically Atzmos, the essence of Hashem. Then we connected it with Hayesheves Baganim, the verse that talks about sitting in the garden, and we discussed and explained that means that in addition to our service bringing a revelation of Atzmos, the essence of God in this world, in addition, it causes a revelation in each level. It affects each level of reality from the highest spiritual realms to our world in its own unique way. So there's a difference. When we talk about the essence of God, that's equal everywhere. But in addition to that transcendence, which we call the revelation of which we call istalic, because it's in a manner of sort of detachment, because it's beyond all levels equally. In addition to that, there is an element of godliness, or an aspect of godliness that impacts each world and each space in its own unique way. We discussed in chapter 3 why this is based on a teaching of the Maggid, the idea of the changes that happen below, the things that go on in our own reality impact God or are rooted in God's essence. So because they're engraved in God's mind, as it were, the Jewish people are engraved in God's mind in whatever state they're in. So therefore, it has to be that we affect him in that kind of personal way as well, even in his essence. That's where we left off the end of chapter 3. In chapter 4, we now go to the second half of the Maimer, now beginning here at chapter 4, and the Rebbe is going to focus on the third point. And that is the idea of Tzivos Hashem, what it means to be Tzivos Hashem. So this is a theme, one of the big themes in the Basi Legani series in general, this concept of Tzivos Hashem. We're going to focus on one aspect of it in this Maimer. The next couple of years, in the later chapters, it's also addressed. So it's a much broader theme than what we're going to deal with here. We're going to try and stay focused and true to the text and focus on what's being discussed in this Maimer. So in the previous Rebbe's Maimer, after he discusses Basi Legani and Hayesheves Beganim, he seemingly turns to another point, which is the idea that the Jewish people are called Tzivos Hashem, the tzva'is of God. Tzva'is, what that means, we're going to get to soon exactly what the translation, the meaning of tzva'is is. Most commonly translated as hosts. Tzva'is is like a multitude, hosts or legions. It means a large group of people, of things, of creations. That God creates the light of the heaven and all its hosts, meaning all the stars. So we're talking about a large group. Tzva'is is also one of God's names, as we're going to learn soon. Now, the Rebbe says here that this third idea is not just a new idea that the previous Rebbe introduces, that he'll then turn his attention to in the next chapter of his series, but it flows from these first 2 points. In a sense, it's also almost like an explanation of those 2 points. But we'll see that as we move on in the Maimer. But the point is that the Rebbe immediately connects them, that this is not just another point, but this is related. Now that we discussed the fact that through our divine service, we can draw Atzmos, the essence of God. In addition to drawing the essence of God, we also draw this aspect of, besides Seivid, we also draw the aspect of Memale, that everything is impacted in its own personal way, in a very deep and personal, connected kind of a way, and with an association. That's the reason why the Jewish people are called Tzivos Hashem, the hosts of God. So let's see chapter 4 in the handout, which I just remembered now again that we did not post. So I'm going to post that now momentarily. Bear with me. We'll post that link. So that handout, we're going to be on page Yud Tes in the handout. Let's see if I can find it here. I'll share this link in the chat. Sorry. So we're going to be on page Yutes, chapter 4, is Dalet. So Mamshech Maimer, so the previous Rebbe continues in his Maimer in chapter 10. And he says like this. It's for this reason, what we just outlined before, the first 2 points of the Maimer, that the Jewish people are called Tzivos Hashem, the hosts of God. The host not as a host from hospitality, but host as in legion, as in many. As the verse says, that it was on that very day that the Tzivos Havaya, the hosts of God, left Egypt. What does it mean to say that the Tzivos Havaya? What is this Tzivos Havaya, the hosts of God? What the meaning is, the Jewish people, Israel. Like the verse later says, in the end of this narrative in the Torah, it says that it was on that very day that God took out his people, the Israelites, from the land of Egypt, al tzivaisim, in their hosts, in all their hosts. So the previous Rebbe brings here 2 verses. One showing that the Jewish people are called Tzivos Havaya, and another one proving that the identity is of Tzivos Havaya. That means the Jewish people, as it says, Bnei Yisrael al Tzivaisim, talking about the Jewish people al Tzivaisim. Okay. So we have to explain the reason why the previous Rebbe learns everything, every detail of the previous Rebbe, every word is significant. So if the previous Rebbe is bringing more than one verse to make this point that the Jews are called Tzivos Havaya, we have to understand why. So he says, you can say the reason is, why isn't he satisfied with the first verse that he quotes? And why does he have to bring the second one, because we find the Medrash says, the Medrash comments and explains this verse that he brings, that the Tzivos Havaya left Egypt, and he says, what the Medrash says, what are these Tzivos Havaya? Elu Tzivos Malachi Asher. So we're talking about the hosts of angels, the myriads of angels. That's who that pasuk is referring to. Like we say in the prayer of Heshayna on Sukkot, just as you delivered a nation and their God. It seems that the Rebbe learns here that Elikim is referring to the angels. Angels are also called B'Shem Elikim, they're called Elikim. So just as you deliver the nation and the angels, and then it continues, just as you delivered the multitudes of hosts, and with them the angels, the hosts of angels. So we see that the angels are also called tzivos. So we see the point is not only they're called tzivos, but they also left Egypt with the Jewish people, right? Just as you deliver the people and the angels, talking about delivering the angels as well from Egypt. So the first verse, we can say that interpret it to mean the angels. So therefore he brings another verse to prove that point, that the Jewish people are actually called tzivos as well. That the Jewish people are also referred to as tzivos. The truth is, if you look in chapter 10 of the previous Rebbe's Maimer, the previous Rebbe also brings another verse. He brings these 2, and then he brings another verse where he says, that in this very day I took out your hosts from the land of Egypt. It's another verse. So actually, he brings 3 verses where we find that the Jewish people are called tzivos. Here, the Rebbe only touches on 2. The Rebbe addressed this in the Farbrengen of Shabbos after Yud Shvat of that year. The Rebbe asks, why does he bring the 3 verses, not the 2? And about what he mentions here in the Maimer, the Rebbe says, the explanation in the Maimer explains why he has to bring the second verse. But if the proof is from the second verse, why bring the first verse? So it's not really an answer to the question in a sense. Here, we're gonna leave that. So the Rebbe gives an explanation there. Again, 3 verses. Remember, we started here today by mentioning that there are 3 themes in chapter 10. So the Rebbe connects these 3 verses that the previous Rebbe brings with the 3 themes in chapter 10. But we'll leave that for another time. So the point is like this: that we see that the Jewish people are referred to as tzivos Hashem. So the previous Rebbe continues in his Maimer, and he asks, why are the Jewish people called tzivos Havaya? The shem tzvos, what's the problem? Why can they be called them whatever you want? What's the problem? So he explains in the Maimer, the shem tzvos, the name tzvos which is one of God's names, as we're going to soon delve into a little bit deeper. So that name, God, is not referred to as Tzvos in the entire Chumash, in the entire Torah. The first appearance of the name Tzvos as a name of God is in the book of Samuel, the book of Shmuel. We'll get to that again a little bit later. But the point is that the name Tzvos, God as the name Tzvos, doesn't appear in the Torah. The Kankairis Yisrael, Tzivos Havaya, and here the Jewish people are called Tzivos Havaya. So that's what the previous Rebbe asks in his Maimer. So the Rebbe explains the question. In other words, what's so the name Tzvos doesn't appear in the Torah. Okay, we're not talking about Hashem as Tzvos. We're talking about the Jewish people as Tzvos Hashem. What exactly is the question? So the Rebbe explains. So Bir Akushya explain the question that's asked. Exile is what is the definition of exile? Is a concealment of godliness. So from this we understand, what is the opposite of exile? The antithesis of exile is redemption. So if exile means concealment of godliness, so what's redemption? Revelation of godliness. What is the redemption all about? And in what is the manner in which the redemption comes? Through revelation of godliness. So exile is concealment. So the process of redemption is a process of revealing godliness until it's fully manifest and revealed. That is the meaning of redemption. So Pisa, based on this, so if redemption is all about revealing godliness, then the name given to the people should have been one that reflects the reality around them, which is a revelation of godliness. In other words, the Jewish people represent God. That's who they are. They're here to represent God and present God in the world. And so therefore, the name of the Jewish people at any given moment should reflect the reality, whatever is manifest by God at that time. So if the Jewish people are in the process of redemption, that means that what's happening in the world, a revelation of godliness is starting to occur. So then the name the Jewish people should have as the agents through which we bring God's message to the world, and the reality, the awareness of God to the world should reflect that reality. That's the question. And what was manifest at the time of the redemption? The name of God that represents transcendence and revelation. What was that? What was the name that was revealed at that time? Shazo Hagilei D'Shem Havaya. It's the revelation of the name Havaya. Yud Kei Vav Kei, the ineffable name of God. How do we know this? Because the verse says so itself. Like the verse says, that God tells Moshe Rabbeinu in the beginning of Parshas Vayera that I appeared to the patriarchs and I appeared to them as Kel Shakai, as God Almighty. But Shmi Havaya, my name Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei, that name of God, that was not manifest to them. I did not reveal that to them. So that was them. But now, in the time of the Exodus of Egypt, now God's name, Havaya, is manifest. So what is being revealed now? Which name of God? Havaya. So the people should have been called by a name that reflects this revelation. Nevertheless, not only were the people not called by a name that was revealed in the time of the patriarchs, but even more so, they're called Tzivos, hosts, in relation to the name of God that is Tzvos, God of hosts. True that the name Tzvos is a holy name. We know that there are many, God is called by many names, but there are 7 names of God which one is not allowed to erase. God forbid. That's a big sin. So God is called by many names. God is called kind, God is called compassionate, God is forgiving. Those are all names, titles that we give God, but those names do not possess the same holiness, and so those aren't names for which there's a prohibition of erasing God's name. There are 7 names of God those are the names of God that are not allowed to be erased. One of them is Tzvos. It's a very holy name. But nevertheless, this name wasn't around in the time of the patriarchs. And so even more so, when Moshe came on the scene, a higher, heightened sense of revelation of godliness, when Moshe appears, that name doesn't appear either. Not even in the time of the exile, and certainly not in the time of the redemption. Which is an even higher level than and a time of more divine revelation than a time of exile. So we don't find that the Jewish people, we don't find the name Tzvos in relation to God, not in the time of exile, not in the time of Moshe, not in the time of the patriarchs, in times that were seemingly less divine revelation. So, and suddenly, specifically at a time, at the height of the divine revelation, one of the times in history, the greatest revelation of God is the Exodus of Egypt, the Jewish people are called by a name that we don't find not before, not at the time, not till much later. So that's the question. Now, the rest of the chapter, the Rebbe is going to explain this question with another two layers. So he quotes the question, then he explains the question, and now for the rest of chapter 4, we're going to dig deeper into the question. 2 more stages. Another layer of depth from the Alter Rebbe, and then a third layer of depth from the Mittel Rebbe. So we're on page Chaf, the second paragraph of chapter 4. To understand this question in greater depth, so we can understand it based on what the Alter Rebbe explains in his Maimer by the title Be'etzamay Mazeh, one of the verses that we just quoted before. In Torah, where Yusad al-Maimer Azal, and his explanation about, he talks there about the name Tzvos Havai, he talks about this topic, and his explanation is premised on the saying of the Gemara that Miyom Shabara Kadosh Baruch Hu say Lama Eloi Hoyo Adam Shekroi La Kadosh Baruch Hu Tzvos Ad Shabbos Chanachu. The Gemara says that from when the moment God creates the world, there is nobody who called God by the name Tzvos until Chana. Chana was the mother of Shmuel. Chana, we find this not in, as we said, not in Chumash, and not in the first 2 books of the prophets, but in the book of Shmuel, the book of Samuel, right in the beginning, where we learn about Chana and her going to the temple, the tabernacle in Shiloh, and praying to God, asking for a child. And there she refers to God as Hashem Tzvos, God of hosts. And she's the first one to use that name. Afterwards, Shmuel prophesizes with that name, and then the later prophets, as you get to later generations, the later prophets also started to become more and more common, but Chana was the first. Okay, so he explains, the Alter Rebbe explains in his Maimer, that he explains that the names of God are the vessels of the 10 attributes of the world of Atzilus, in which the infinite light is enclosed, and is unified with them in a complete and total unification. Like the Zohar says, Tikkun Zohar says that he and his effusions, his emanations are one. Okay, what does this mean? So there's a statement in the Tikkun Zohar. Iu v'chayu yichad, iu v'garmo yichad. Iu v'chayu yichad. Iu is you, or he. Ihu, he. V'chayohi, and his life force, his emanating life force, the force that gives life, chad are one. And ihu, he, v'garmohi, and his what he's affected, in other words, what he creates, is chad is also one. So God is one, and so chayuhi, his life, and garmohi, what he. So that's referred to as the light and the vessel. Chayui is oires, is the light, and garmoi is kalim, the vessels. So what does this mean, light and vessels? And what does this have to do with names? So the Rebbe is going to explain. Let's just do just a little explanation outside, then we're going to go into the text. So there, just like you have in a person, you have the person himself, and then the person has a name. What's the purpose of the name? So the name is a person's name is necessary to be known. If there's only one person, he wouldn't need a name. But since there are many people, we want to identify one person from the other. So for that, we have names. So the name is already not you. On the other hand, the name is an expression of you, an extension of you. Now, while a name is certainly it expresses the soul, is related to the person's soul, but it's already not the person himself. So the same is true. God wants to be known to his creation. He wants to create. So there's God in his essence that's unknowable. But then there's God as he wants to be a creator and have a creation that will come to know him. So for that, God needs a name. How does God choose to be known? He chooses to be known as kind, as compassionate, by his actions, by the things he does. So God creates with kindness. So kindness, God sort of encloses himself in this attribute of kindness, and that's a name of God. Now, in the kindness itself, there are two components. There's the light and there's the vessel. There's the potential for kindness, but that potential for kindness needs to be realized in sort of an actual kindness, in a vessel of kindness. Or to put it in other terms, a person has, let's say, the capacity to see. So there's the potential to see, that would be, let's say, the light of seeing, and then there's the vessel, the eye, through which the person can see, and then there's the seeing, a third component, which we'll get to a little bit later. But so you need the eye and the potential to see, they both come together, they become one in the eye, and that's how a person can see. So the same is true with God, to sort of make himself knowable to his creation, and even to go through this process of becoming creator, he has to sort of take on this persona of kindness, or of compassion, and that's the light and the vessel. In the world of Atzilus, even though we talked about, and when we talked to Yeshevas Begani, we said Neshama and Atzilus, we said Atzilus, there it's a world of total oneness, of godliness. So on one hand, we call it a world because it's already some form of creation. God is already known by the 10 attributes, right? You have 10 attributes of Atzilus, you have really even beyond Atzilus, but focusing on Atzilus. So what's unique about Atzilus? The world of Atzilus, there everything is one, it's all within God. So on the one hand, there's the light and there's the vessel, but it's all part of him. So as if to say, you couldn't differentiate between a person and his power to see and his eye and his eye. That's all. It's all the very essence of the person himself. In our reality, it's hard to fathom this concept. But within God, with us, we can just look at it in relation, as we're going to learn a little bit later, in relation to the outside, in relation to actually seeing something outside of yourself. This is all within yourself. But within God, it's all, on the one hand, there's kindness in Atzilus, but it's completely one with God. What you see there is only God. You could say, in a sense, it's kind of like, and he used the term here that it becomes enclosed and unified completely. Maybe you can say it's kind of like the tzaddik. When you look at a tzaddik, so you see, on the one hand, you see a person, a human being, in body, right? You look at people, we all have a divine soul, and yet you don't see the soul, you see the body, which conceals the soul. So even though the body and the soul are completely united and unified, that's what gives the person life. That is, the body and soul are inseparable in a sense. Person passes away, they do separate for a time, to an extent. But the point is, you don't see the soul, you see the body. Then you see with the tzaddik, you look at the tzaddik, and what do you see? On one end you see the body, but really you don't see the body, you see godliness, you see the soul shining through. A nasi, you see God. Why? Because that divine energy has become so united that it just becomes part of that. There's nothing separate. It's just soul. So in the world of Atzilus, he is one, even with the vessel, even with the shell, even with the vessel that is the quality, let's say, of kindness, is all still within himself, within God. Okay, so the thing is like this. We have the light. Why do you have to have a light and a vessel? Because if I just have the potential for kindness, but I don't have a vessel for it, there won't be a way for kindness to manifest. Because it's completely abstract and it's completely infinite. And so there's no way for it to manifest. So for that, there needs to be a vessel, a container that contains it, that then gives it that tinge. So just like if you take a cup of water, you put the water into a cup, now the water is contained in the cup. If you put it in a blue cup, now the water looks blue. You put it in a red cup, the water looks red. But without it being contained in a vessel, the water's everywhere. You can't drink the water if it's not in a vessel. So the same is true with the names of God. For there to be kindness, to take on that persona of kindness, there needs to be the light and the vessel. And that's what we call the name of God. Let's see it inside now, the Rebbe's words. What does this mean when we say names as referring to God? The 7 names that are not erased. It's similar to the concept of names down here below. It's only in a fusion. It's not the person itself. The name is not you. You are beyond your name as well. In a sense, you only need a name for somebody else. But still, so the name is in a fusion. It's a ha'ara. It's an external aspect. The same is true above with regard to God. That the lights, the divine lights that are revealed and come down here below, that manifest down here below, are called names. In other words, all the divine energy that is manifest down here is only a name. It's only an effusion of God. It's not him himself. In order for these lights to be revealed and experienced, it's only when they are measured and limited, when they're defined and confined. You can't receive that light unless there's some kind of a description of it, which a definition is limiting. Something is defined. It goes from here till there, and that's where it stops. So this is referred to as, this definition is referred to as the vessel of the light, through which one can now receive that light. This is the meaning of the 7 names of God that are not erased. These are the lights, the divine lights, as they are in kelim, in vessels. Each light has its own vessel. When we talk about these 7 names of God that are not erased, there is the way these names are within the world of Atzilus, where in Atzilus, as we said, is the Iyu v'chayoy. He is one with his creative life force, and Iyu v'chayoy, he is one with what he created. He's one with all of it. Meaning that they are not, they don't have any kind of apparent separate existence of their own. Rather, they are completely absorbed within and united with him. This is the status in the world of Atzilus, which is also referred to as the world of oneness, because it's all godliness. So therefore, in the world of Atzilus, which is the world of oneness, where there's only God and there's nothing else. So, as we said, on the one hand, we call it a world because there's already light and vessels, and yet it's Olam Ha'achdus, all of that, it's all God. He's completely united with them, that you don't see the lights or the vessels, it's all God. This was the status in the times of Moshe. This reality of the world of Atzilus, that oneness of God, was what was the reality in the times of Moshe. As is known, that Moshe was a soul from Atzilus, as it is down here. What does it mean that in the Neshama of Atzilus? It's another topic. The point is, though, that Moshe's Neshama comes from Atzilus, even though it comes through all of these worlds, it comes down into this world as it is in Atzilus, meaning not separate, just as in Atzilus. All there is godliness, nothing else. So same is true with Moshe, when he, as he was down here, was like he was in Atzilus. And so therefore, that and what was Moshe's primary function was to bring the Torah as it is in Atzilus, where it's totally one with God, and give it as it is in Atzilus to this. One of the reasons that the Torah is referred to as is compared to water is because the water starts up on a high place and comes all the way down to a low place, and when it comes down, it's the same water. No matter how low it comes, no matter how low it descends, it remains the same water as it was at the top in its source in the spring. And the same is true with Torah, that Torah as it is in heaven, that's how the Torah is given down here as it is in heaven. Who did Moshe give it to? To the Dor Deah, a generation of knowledge. Dor Shel Moshe referred to as Moshe's generation was a wise generation, which means Shahoy b'madregase shel Moshe. Moshe, we know, represents, besides being in Neshama of Atzilus, represents divine wisdom. And so his people, his generation referred to as a people of wisdom. Why? Because they were, in a sense, on the same level as Moshe. Shalach and Nikraim, Dor Shel Moshe. That's why they're referred to in the Medrash as Moshe's generation, because they were similar to Moshe. Dor, the word Dor, which means generation, is Malashon Shura, like a line, meaning on the same line. The Gemara says, the more famous one, maybe the Gemara in that talks about what it says in the Megillah, V'dar v'seichores, and describes Achashverosh's feast. So it says Dar v'seichores. The Gemara wants to know all those things. What the description of Achashverosh's feast? What all those things mean? So Dar, the Gemara says Dare rows. There are many rows, seichores, that went around. So the idea of Dor, which is translated as generation, the Rebbe is translating here Dor as in line, on the same row, meaning they could sit, elbow to elbow with Moshe, side by side. Hainu shahaya ba'isa shura. Meaning, they're in the same status, the same place as Moshe. Which is that what was Moshe's, what level was that? That was what was going on in Atzilus. Where there, God and His light and the vessels of the light are all one. So that was the people in the time of Moshe, the people that leave Egypt, since they're called Moshe's people, Moshe's generation, meaning on par with Moshe. So therefore, just as Moshe is in the Neshama of Atzilus, Moshe was a manifestation of the oneness of godliness in Atzilus, as it is in Atzilus, which is all oneness, all God, no recognition or of any sort of independent entity other than God. He was totally united and clothed, and therefore sort of shines through the vessels. The vessels and the lights are all, in a sense, translucent, completely clear, and what shines through is only God. The same is true with His people. That was what was going on then. Amnam, however, Hashem Tzvois, the name Tzvois, lo niskab bizmano. So what was going on? The name Havaya, the name Havaya of transcendent revelation, that name would fit with what was going on with Moshe's status and the people's status, what was happening at that time. The name Tzvois doesn't appear. Why doesn't it appear at that time? What possible value can contribution can the name Tzvois make in such a situation, such reality? What does this mean? This means, as the Alter Rebbe explains in his Maimer in Torah, the name Tzvois, what is the word Tzvois? Comes from the word, like, it means like chayoles, legions, hosts of soldiers. Then gedudei neshamis u'malachim. These are legions of souls and angels, the bria of the world of bria. Asher emis v'legdudav, which, as we know, there's no number to his legions. Ukdisa b'Gemara, as the Gemara says, b'pirushim tzvais. The Gemara explains what is the meaning of the name tzvais, and it says oisu b'tzava shalei. That why is God called tzvais? Because He's a ois. The word tzvais is made up of two words, tzava and ois, legions and ois, a sign. Ois means in Yiddish the word ois, which is Hebrew. You could say ois getzeichen. It means unique. He's exceptional. He sticks out. God is exceptional among His tzava, among the legions. True that the name Tzvai, since it's a divine name, a holy name, one that you can't erase. And we said already, what's the function of a name? Is it to reveal godliness? So true, that's what it's about. It's about the name Tzvai. Also, God is significant. He's distinct. He sticks out among His hosts. That implies also revelation of godliness. That's why it's with God's name, from a name that can't be erased. Nevertheless, it's in what manner is God manifest through the name Tzvais is as God stands out among the many. Well, if in Atzilus, can you say there are many? You can't say there are many. Atzilus is only God. It's all oneness. Atzilus is Eilam Achta, is the world of oneness. Weird. Suddenly we get this idea that God is God Almighty among many. Where are these many? So I'm sorry. From these multitudes, God sticks out. What's the meaning of Shem Tzvais? The name Tzvais is that even when we go down into Biyah, into the next three worlds, spiritual worlds, where they're not oneness, it's not total unity with God. There's already a certain awareness of self, of others, of otherness of existence. And suddenly here we say in the world of Bria already, which is the highest of the three worlds after Atzilus, we already say that there's no number to the amount of his legions. There are many. In other words, there are called an infinite and no number amount of creations. And what's unique about the name Tzvais is that even when we come down to a place where there are many, where there's not just oneness of God, even there, God is still distinct and still stands out as God Almighty, the one who's above all of it, creator of all of it. So that's the significance of the name Tzvais, that even when you get to a lower place, a place where there is the oneness of God is not felt, is not manifest, and you're in a space where there is a multitude of creations. Even there, the significance of the name Tzvais is to bring that awareness even there as well. However, but when we talk about in the days of Moshe, when the people were in a state where they didn't have this idea of tzava, why didn't they have this idea of tzava? The need for God to be called tzvais, outstanding among the many, because the vision is gala etzlam koyach hapayil benifal kameshu chad im ihu. Because at that point, what was revealed and manifest in the people, in the creation, was the impact of the Creator in His creation, as they are one with Him. That's why the revelation of the name Tzvais was not necessary then. And therefore, we don't see God being called Tzvais at the time. Why? Because the Shaga B'tira, Mayane. What would be what use is there to a candle in the sunlight? However, in the later generations, after the face of the sun, which is the face of Moshe, had passed, and now the people were in a state of the leader being Yeshua. The face of Yeshua is like the moon. And we know already the moon, when the moon comes out, that's when the stars come out. There's not just the sun shining, but there's the moon, and then there are all the stars. Suddenly there's room for other things. And to the point that it continues, the godliness was less apparent from a step down from Moshe's time to Yeshua's time, and then from Yeshua as it comes down even further to the elders, and from the elders down to the Nevi'im, to the prophets. When prophecy, obviously we know Moshe was a prophet, but prophecy really started after Yeshua, after the elders. That was then the era of Nevi'im, as the Mishnah lists the chain of transmission of the Torah from Sinai all the way down to the sages. It lists a stage from Yeshua to the elders, and from the elders to the prophets. It was after the elders that you got to the prophets. So the prophets are 3 steps removed from Moshe. In other words, 3 steps down. And these prophecies were not like Moshe's prophecy, which was which was a unique prophecy. Like we know the verse says that there was no prophet like Moshe. Moshe prophesied completely differently than all other prophets. So it's incomparable. So then what happened? Then the service, divine service in the time of the prophets was in a manner of serving God as would be fitting for the worlds of Biyah, and the awareness of godliness that is expressed in the worlds of Biyah, not the world of total oneness and unity. In those lower worlds, not only is he not one with the vessels, not even one with the light. There's fragmentation. Therefore, the prophets needed. arrives. The function of the prophets was to introduce this concept of tzvais, that God is outstanding among the many, that even in the worlds of Biyah, he should be one with his creation, just as it is in Atzilus. So based on this, we can understand the depth of the question here. In the Maimer, that since in the time of Moshe, and because of Moshe's function and the level of service of his generation at that time, tzava wasn't necessary. Then why are the Jewish people called tzivos havaya, the tzivos of Hashem? In other words, the question here now is not just that the people are a reflection of the divine manifestation at the time. So if tzvos is not manifest, so then why should they be called by that name? The question's a lot deeper. Why isn't tzvos a name that appears in the Torah? We know it doesn't appear, but why? So that we explain here from the Alter Rebbe. The reason it doesn't appear in the Torah is because at that time, when the Torah is given, at the time of the Exodus of Egypt, there was no need for the tzvos didn't need to function. There's no need for the name tzvos. The whole function of the name tzvos is to reveal God among a multiplicity of creations, an infinite amount of creations that feel separate. But in that time, the people were completely one and united and felt the total oneness of God. And so therefore, in that space, there's no need for it. It's like saying to have the stars shine during the day. Stars don't shine during the day. That's scientifically, we're talking metaphorically. That this because you have the sun. So at that time, there's no need to reveal God in the many. If there is no many, there's just him. So if that's what was going on at that time, so that's why God is not referred to as tzvos. So if the whole function of the Jewish people being called tzvos, seemingly now, would be that they reveal God in a world of many, in a fragmented otherness creation, what does that have to do with that time? It wasn't the service, the divine service at that time, and so therefore that enhances the question: why is it that we find that in the time of the Exodus of Egypt that the people are called Tzivos Hashem? Another layer of the question will be added in the next paragraph from the Mittel Rebbe, and I think we'll get to it, the Mitzvah Hashem, in the next class.